History is often explained with maps, treaties, and clean lines drawn by men far from the killing. But some wars are not decided on paper. They are decided at arm's length, in dust and heat, where fear replaces doctrine and survival rewrites every rule ever taught. This is one of those wars, a war born not from glory, but from hunger, resentment, and a piece of curved steel that turned the Atacama Desert into a psychological graveyard. You do not scream when your throat is cut. You can't. The air escapes through the wound carved beneath the jaw, through a passage where breath no longer belongs. It is not a failure of courage. It is anatomy, physics, blood pressure, and collapsed windpipes. And in the deepest darkness of the driest desert on Earth, death did not arrive with thunder or gunfire. It arrived quietly. It arrived hooked. A curved blade of rusted steel, agricultural in origin, primitive in design, not meant to stab cleanly, but to tear, to hook, to pull. They called it the Corvo. And in 1879, this simple tool became South America's most feared symbol of terror. Welcome to the White Hell. Forget the myths of honorable war. Forget European formations and ceremonial discipline. This is the Atacama Desert, where the sun kills faster than bullets, where water is more valuable than blood, and where three nations prepared to destroy each other over bird droppings and pale stones. Nitrate, the white gold that fertilized Europe's fields and fed the world's gunpowder factories. The hatred behind this war was not abstract. It was raw and personal. Class against class, race against race, desperation against desperation. On one side stood Peru and Bolivia, confident owners of the land, fortified and numerically superior. On the other stood Chile, a narrow strip of territory trapped between mountains and sea, poor, isolated, disciplined to the edge of brutality. Officially, the war began over 10 cents, a tax on exported nitrate, absurd on its face. Tens of thousands would die over a few coins, but those 10 cents were merely the spark. The powder keg had been filling for decades. When Bolivia seized Chilean assets in Antofagasta, lawyers were not dispatched. Warships were. On February 14, 1879, Chilean troops landed without resistance. The occupation was calm. The storm was not. While generals in Santiago and Lima studied maps and water tables, a different army was forming far from command tents. In the ports of Valparaiso, the coal mines of Lota, and the wheat fields of central Chile, men were being gathered who did not fit any manual of war. They were laborers, drifters, men who had carried death on their backs since childhood. They did not know parade drills. Many had no boots, but they carried something no strategist had calculated. The Corvo hung at their waist, not as regulation equipment, but as a part of daily life. It cut grain, split rock, settled tavern disputes when words failed. When the army tried to standardize them, it failed. Uniforms hung loose. Rifles felt foreign. But one detail terrified the officers. These men rejected the bayonet. Too long, too clumsy. They trusted the blade they knew. The Corvo was not a knife. Its inward curving blade hooked flesh and bone. A straight blade wounds. The Corvo dismembers. It enters, catches, and when pulled, brings everything with it. Designed not to duel, but to end. Chile's high command argued fiercely. This brutality had to be banned. The army must look modern, civilized, Prussian. The war answered for them. To take the desert, they did not need parades. They needed killers. The Corvo was authorized. In the north, Peru prepared. Money, modern ships like the Huáscar, strong defensive ground. Many soldiers, indigenous men from mountains and jungles, were dragged into a desert they did not understand, to fight for causes they barely knew. They were told the Chileans would flee. No one warned them what would happen when the bullets ran out. The sea burned first. Admiral Grau haunted Chilean supply lines, delaying invasion, buying time. Brilliant naval chess, but the war would not be decided on water. Chile needed land, needed boots in Tarapacá. That meant Pisagua. Pisagua was a natural fortress. Sheer cliffs, crossfire artillery, fortified heights. On November 2, 1879, landing boats hit rough water. Rifle fire erupted from above. Men drowned under the weight of their gear. The surf turned red before boots touched sand. Then something broke logic. Those who reached shore did not hide. They ran upward, into fire, climbing loose sand that slid beneath every step. Rifles were abandoned. Steel flashed instead. The first close combat was seconds away. The climb was agony. 2 steps forward, 1 back. Hearts pounding loud enough to drown commands. At the top, defenders saw something worse than soldiers climbing toward them. They saw a pack. When the lines collided, the rules of modern war collapsed. Bayonets meant nothing. The Corvo erased distance. A block with a rifle failed. The Chilean closed in, almost an embrace. The blade hooked behind the neck or into the gut. 1 pull. Done. No heroics, no mercy. Trench lines became slaughterhouses. Panic spread faster than gunfire. Pisagua fell in hours. Doctors froze at the wounds afterward. These were not bullets. These were openings. Anatomy laid bare. The legend was born. But the desert waited. Victory bred arrogance. Chilean command pursued inland toward Tarapacá, believing the enemy broken. The march was torture. 60 pounds of gear under a merciless sun. Thirst became hallucination. Lips split. Water tasted of rust and rot. The enemy was not fleeing. They were waiting. On November 27, 1879, Chilean troops entered the Tarapacá ravine. What looked like a weak camp was a trap. Fire rained down from the heights. Officers died instantly. Command disintegrated. Ammunition vanished. And then the bullets were gone. Surrounded, outnumbered, rifles useless. Peruvians advanced confidently. The Chileans did not surrender. Steel rang along the line. One scream, not an order, but rage, rose above the chaos. Charge, against reason, against survival itself. Exhausted men surged uphill armed only with knives. Mathematical suicide. But fear is not math. When the wave reached the trenches, gunfire stopped. Screams replaced it. Tarapacá was a tactical defeat, but a psychological catastrophe for the alliance. The enemy would not yield. The enemy preferred death to surrender. The war had changed forever. On the morning of May 26, 1880, the coast awakens beneath a familiar curse. The Camanchaca, the thick Pacific fog, rolls inland and smothers the battlefield like a gray shroud. It hides everything. 20,000 Allied soldiers wait on the heights. 14,000 Chileans form below. Absolute silence reigns. No commands, no movement. Only the distant bark of a dog, the nervous snort of a horse somewhere in the mist. No one can see the enemy. It is a war fought against ghosts. Then the sun rises. The fog burns away, and with it disappears any illusion of mercy. The battlefield reveals itself in full. The lines are drawn. There is no retreat left in this story. Artillery opens first. Steel titans begin their duel. Shells scream through the air and detonate in pillars of dirt, smoke, and torn flesh. Following Baquedano's doctrine, the order everyone feared and secretly expected finally comes down the line. A frontal assault. No cover, no flanking, bare chests against machine guns. The Chilean divisions advance. Bullets tear into the sand, kicking it into the air like rain. The first Chilean line is cut down as if harvested by an invisible scythe. Allied machine guns crank endlessly, vomiting death in a rhythm too fast to count. Mounted officers become perfect targets. One by one they fall. The advance collapses. Men throw themselves flat, clawing at the sand, trying to disappear as lead swarms above their heads. For a moment, defeat feels inevitable. The slaughter is so severe that Chilean morale begins to fracture. Retreat seems logical, sensible. But in reserve, waiting their turn, stand the battalions that carry the Corvo. Atacama, Coquimbo, miners, dock workers, men hardened by brutal land. They watch their comrades disintegrate ahead of them, and something ancient snaps inside. It is not fear, It is rage. No official order arrives, or perhaps it is lost in the chaos. An officer raises his saber and shouts a single word. It echoes down the line. Bugles sound deguelo. Not a march, a death sentence, no prisoners. The second wave rises. They do not march, they run. They run screaming insults, eyes wide, pupils blown open by violence and heat. Bullets still fall, but they no longer matter. They leap over their own dead, using bodies as steps. The distance closes, 100 meters, 50, 20. Allied gunners fire grape shot at point-blank range, turning men into red mist. But there are too many. They cannot kill them fast enough. The first Chilean vaults over the sandbags, then another, then dozens. Gunfire ends. Knives take over. Inside the Allied fortifications, space is tight. Long rifles become useless. The Corvo rules. Atacama miners fight with the savage intimacy of a tavern brawl multiplied to industrial scale. They hook, they tear, they open bodies. There is no fencing technique here, only the will to gut the man in front of you before he does the same. Blood soaks the trench sand, turning it into slick red mud. Men fight atop corpses, slip on entrails, kill with stones, fists, teeth. The Allied line, strong enough to endure artillery and rifle charges, collapses under the terror of close combat. Panic spreads through Peruvian and Bolivian reserves. Watching what happens to the first line is too much. The front breaks. Tacna, the bloodiest battle of the war, ends not with surrender, but with a manhunt. As the Allied army dissolves into the desert, Bolivia withdraws from the conflict, shattered. Its mountains recede into memory. Its access to the sea is lost forever that red afternoon. For Peru, the nightmare continues. The final southern bastion remains, Arica. Arica is not a city. It is a death trap. Dominated by the Morro, a massive rock rising 130 meters above the sea, plunging vertically into the Pacific. A natural fortress reinforced by engineers, bristling with cannon ringed by landmines. At its summit, Colonel Francisco Bolognesi knows the truth. The Southern Army is gone. No reinforcements are coming. Victory is impossible. Chile sends an envoy. Surrender is offered. Logical, humane. Bolognesi gathers his officers and answers with words that seal their fate. I have sacred duties to fulfill, and I will fulfill them until the last cartridge is burned. 2,000 men are condemned. Baquedano will not wait. No siege. He wants Arica now. The order is simple, direct assault. Climb the mountain under fire. Take the summit. Once again, the shadow of the Corvo looms. The regiments chosen, the 3rd and 4th line, have already tasted blood at Pisagua and Tacna. They know mines will explode beneath their feet. They know climbing means dying. Dawn, June 7th, 1880. Cold, dark. Chilean troops move silently toward the base of the Morro. No preparatory fire. Surprise is their only weapon. Then the ground erupts. Explosions tear men apart. Bodies fly. Surprise is lost. Hell opens from above. Cannons fire downward. Rifles blaze. A vertical wall of death. The Chileans do not return fire. They run. They begin climbing. "To the Morro, boys!" a wounded commander shouts as he falls. Rage takes over. Mines meant to stop them only fuel the fury. Friends are turned into pulp, and whatever humanity remains burns away. 55 minutes. That is all it takes. 55 minutes from the first shot to the summit. An impossible feat. They climb like enraged insects, scrambling over rock and shrapnel, driven by adrenaline stronger than survival instinct. At the top, tactics disappear. What follows is vengeance. The Peruvians have kept their promise. Their cartridges are gone. The Chileans are not. No quarter is given. Officers scream for restraint, strike their own men with sabers to stop the killing. But the blood frenzy cannot be controlled. The Corvo rises and falls again and again. Bolognesi dies standing by his word. Ugarte, legend says, rides his horse into the sea rather than surrender the flag. The Peruvian banner falls. The Lone Star rises. The South is conquered. Bolivia has no sea. Peru has lost its professional armies. Logic says the war should end here, but logic died in the desert. Lima refuses to fall. In desperation, the Peruvian government arms civilians, students, firefighters, shopkeepers, laborers. Two massive defensive lines rise outside the capital, San Juan and Miraflores. Walls of human flesh meant to stop the southern tide. Chile must take Lima to force peace. They launched the largest amphibious operation South America has seen. Men, horses, cannons, supplies shipped north. January 1881. They reach the gates of Lima. The city knows what is coming. They've heard the stories. The Corvo, the Rotos. The fear is as powerful as the guns. Carrillos and Miraflores are not battles. They are national collapse. Resistance is brave but chaotic. Civilians fight with courage, but cannot stop a veteran army hardened by 2 years of desert slaughter. When the lines break, the true horror begins. Carrillos burns, looting, fire, drunken violence. A night of barbarism that stains victory. Order collapses so completely that Chilean officers execute their own soldiers to restore control. The beast they unleashed turns on everyone. Lima falls. The Chilean flag flies over Pizarro's palace. Still, the war does not end. Peru has mountains, and it has a man who refuses reality. Andrés Avelino Cáceres, the Witch of the Andes. While politicians debate surrender, Cáceres escapes into the highlands, wounded, broke, alone. He speaks to Quechua-speaking farmers, tells them invaders come for their land, their women, their gods. Thus begins the cruelest phase, the Breña campaign. No open fields, no grand armies. This is Vietnam in the Andes, Afghanistan in the 19th century. Chilean soldiers, masters of desert heat, now climb above 4,000 meters. Altitude crushes their lungs, cold freezes fingers. Rocks watch them. Cáceres fights perfectly. He strikes and vanishes. Rocks tumble onto columns. Bridges fall. Water is poisoned. Shadows become enemies. The Corvo meets new rivals. Slings, rolling stones, spears. Frustration becomes cruelty. Villages burn. Suspected peasants are executed. War to the death. Filthy, forgotten, fought in snow and fog. Men die of typhus, cold, or with throats cut in their sleep. Chile bleeds slowly. They need an end. Mothers demand sons return. The economy strains. They hunt the ghost. And finally, on July 10, 1883, on the slopes of Huamachuco, they corner him. Huamachuco is not a battlefield. It is a trap in the clouds. 200 meters above sea level, thin air, cold bones, fog-hiding cliffs. Here, the last card of resistance is played. Alejandro Gorostiaga, the Chilean colonel, understands the stakes with brutal clarity. If Cáceres is not destroyed today, this war could bleed on for another 10 years. His soldiers are exhausted from hunting a ghost through the Andes. They want to go home, but the Witch of the Andes still holds the advantage. Cáceres occupies the high ground. From above, his men, survivors of the regular army mixed with peasants armed with whatever they could find, look down on the Chilean lines. They are starving, poorly clothed, many barefoot on frozen rock, but altitude is a weapon and they control it. The battle begins without elegance. No grand maneuvers, no subtle strategy, just a brutal collision. The Chileans advance uphill once again, defying gravity as if repetition has numbed fear. This time, the Peruvian fire is disciplined and precise. Chilean formations stagger. For a brief, terrifying instant, they recoil. For a moment, the impossible seems within reach. It looks as if Cáceres' irregular army might shatter the Chilean line, and that is when emotion overtakes discipline. Seeing the enemy hesitate, the guerrillas abandon their strong positions and surge downhill in pursuit. They shout, fire wildly, drunk on the belief that liberation is finally at hand. They chase too far. They expose themselves. Then the curse returns. Rifle fire thins. A trigger is pulled. Click. Another, nothing. Ammunition runs out. Poorly organized supply lines carried by llamas across impossible terrain have failed. The pursuit freezes mid-slope. Men stand with empty rifles, staring in horror as the Chileans realize the silence. Gorostiaga hears it instantly. He gives the order his men know by heart. Fix bayonets. Charge. What follows is not a battle. It is a collapse. Chilean infantry surges forward. Cavalry presses uphill, steel against flesh. Without bullets, Cáceres fighters swing rifle butts, grab stones, draw knives. But it is hopeless. Formation disintegrates. The army of the Breña, Peru's last military hope, is destroyed on the slopes of Huamachuco. Cáceres watches his officers fall and his army die. Once again, he escapes, alive, but broken. This time, there is no force left to rebuild. The military war is over. The aftermath is grim. Captured officers receive no mercy. Among them is Leoncio Prado, wounded, leg shattered. His execution is swift. In a final act of defiance, he asks to command his own firing squad. He drinks a cup of coffee and gives the order by tapping the cup with a spoon. With his death, organized war ends. Peace does not follow. Peru is shattered, leaderless, humiliated, divided. Chile cannot sign peace with a phantom like Cáceres, still calling for resistance from the mountains. They need a realist willing to accept defeat. That man is Miguel Iglesias. From the north, Iglesias issues a call for peace. To Cáceres, it is treason. To Iglesias, it is survival. Chile watches carefully and exploits the division. Tarapacá will be ceded permanently. Tacna and Arica will be handed over temporarily. Iglesias will be recognized as president. The War of the Pacific mutates into a Peruvian civil conflict under Chilean supervision. In October 1883, the Treaty of Ancón is signed. Tarapacá and its nitrate wealth passes to Chile. Bolivia is excluded entirely. Its coastline is lost forever. Chilean troops prepare to return home after years abroad and the occupation of Lima. But their return is not clean. Ships leave Callao filled with trophies, statues, books, marble, clocks. Lima is left silent and wounded. In Santiago, celebrations erupt. Chile is now the dominant power of the South Pacific. Wealth flows in from nitrate taxes. Palaces rise. Champagne is poured. But the soldiers do not celebrate. The men of Atacama and Coquimbo march with hollow eyes and scarred bodies. They slept on stone, killed with knives, watched comrades die of thirst. And when the music fades, a question remains unanswered. What does a nation do with tens of thousands of trained killers when the war is over? Demobilization is a disaster. Veterans are thanked, given cheap medals, and sent away. Many have no jobs, no families, no health. Disease, amputations, and trauma follow them home. A bitter phrase spreads. Chile's payment means forgetting. Heroes become beggars. The Corvo does not enter museums. It returns to belts, taverns, alleys. Violence learned in war does not vanish with a treaty. Crime rises. Society begins to fear its own veterans. While nitrate barons grow rich and travel to Europe, soldiers die poor and drunk in damp tenements. 8 years later, resentment explodes. In 1891, Chile turns on itself. President Balmaceda wants to use nitrate wealth for national development. The oligarchy and foreign capital resist. Politics ends the only way men trained by war know how: by gunfire. The Navy rebels. The Army stays loyal. Veterans who once fought side by side now face each other. The Civil War is merciless. Machine guns cut down infantry in green valleys. Artillery destroys homes. The Corvo returns, not for patriotism, but for political murder. The state devours itself. Thousands die. Balmaceda, defeated, takes his own life. Nitrate continues flowing to London. The dead are buried in mass graves and forgotten again. The war created monsters. Peace abandoned them. Chile enters the 20th century limping under the weight of its own victory. The Atacama Desert returns to silence. preserving bodies in its dry grip. Soldiers remain where they fell, uniforms bleached by sun, faces frozen in their final moment. And the survivors, old men now, close their eyes at night and see white salt glare, smell gunpowder, hear steel tearing flesh. The Corvo sleeps, but the scars remain. The desert has the final word.